Tonight we're gonna do something a little bit dangerous. It's not gonna be juggling chainsaws like Elon Musk. It's gonna be something even worse. We are going to confront the thing that you trust the most, your brain. Your brain lies to you constantly. It makes you see faces in clouds, Jesus in toast, your voices in static, and swear that you left your keys right there. Stress, anxiety, booze, medication, even a little bit of caffeine can bend reality. So, we're going to pull back the curtain and see just how easy it is to fool our brains. Because the truth is, our brains are incredibly complex, but they're also really glitchy little pattern seeking machines that evolved to keep us alive. So they're not out there to give you the truth. They're just there for your survival. So our brain is kind of a network, all right, and it contains some 80 something billion neurons. And these neurons can produce a combination of over 100 trillion different connections. And the connections are called synapses. So the synapses transmit electrical and chemical signals between the neurons. And when we are learning something new, or when we repeat the same action over and over and over, like as a career or whatever job you do, or when you're studying, that's why we repeat things so many times when we're teaching kids something, right? What happens is the neurons fire together and they strengthen their connections that form these pathways. It's like one example would be learning to ride a bicycle. If you don't practice it often, you're going to become a little bit clumsy at it and you may fall more often because the skill is weakening because the connection in your brain has weakened. Um, Myself, I learned sign language when I was in college, but I don't practice it with anybody. So I, I haven't fully lost it, but I have a pretty hard time understanding people that are signing really fast at the same speed that they would have been signing when I first learned it, right? Like, and when I first learned it, because I was practicing it, because I was going to the classes, it was a lot easier to get that fluency of the hand movements, the facial expressions, the different sentence structure, and so because I haven't practiced it in so long, the neural connections, the neural pathways that were made during that time of study are becoming weak. I think this is probably where that saying comes from. Practice makes perfect, right? Because it, you know, I don't think it ever becomes perfect. It's more like the more you practice, the more the stronger these neural pathways become, and so it's less likely that that skill will wear itself out over time. So once you have a very solid foundation for your skill, for like whether it be music or a language or a career, then it becomes much stronger. So yeah, practice definitely improves skill, I guess you could say. On the other side of that, we have emotions and thoughts, and these arise from the interactions between different parts of the brain, different regions of the brain that manage different things, right? The chemicals that are released by the neurons, which are called neurotransmitters. One example will be dopamine. That's the one that most people will know of, which is the reward and motivation neurotransmitter. Serotonin, that gives you joy and balances your moods, keeps you from being depressed or keeps you from being anxious. Norepinephrine, which you need that when you're in a dangerous situation or when you're scared because it keeps you alert. And so all of these, so there's some more, but let's just do the basic ones. Like together, these create what we could call like a chemical language of feelings, and kind of the same as practicing a skill. The more that neurotransmitter gets produced, the more likely you are to crave it more and to have that response. That's how addiction happens, right? It can develop if it's something like too low or too high levels naturally that happen that can lead to anxiety, can lead to depression. It can also affect the way that you experience the world around you. All of our thinking and our experiences change the way that our brain is wired. And so this means that we can heal, we can learn new things, we can unlearn the things that we shouldn't know, like hate, for example, because hate is learned. Hate is learned, let's face it. It doesn't matter what age you are, you have that capacity and that ability to rewire your brain and recreate yourself. No more excuses for being an asshole. There's this term that I learned from Richard Gilliver, and it's called pareidolia. So, which is like your brain sort of recognizes different patterns. Um, like if we didn't have that, we will probably have to relearn the shapes of words, the shapes of letters. Sorry, like every time we look at it, right? Like it wouldn't be that like we see that little shape and you're like, oh, it must be an A. And every time we meet somebody, if we didn't have that pareidolia sense in our minds, then we wouldn't remember that person. So it's like a yeah, so it's like a pattern recognition method that the brain uses, and but sometimes it uses it in situations that it shouldn't be, right? Like for example, when we see faces or shapes in objects like in the clouds, in the trees, and the toast and stuff, and yeah, but it's also used through our hearing, like different hearings, like you smell, and it tries like it makes our brain sort of recognize things that are familiar or similar to a pattern that we already knew, and so it's just kind of trying to make sense of an external stimulus. I don't know. It can be something like if you see something dark of the side of your vision, then you might think, if you're a believer, you might think it's a ghost. If you're not, then you're like, well, is somebody else in the house? Or was it? Did somebody break in? And why? So, but that's what we were talking about earlier. Like our brains are not wired for truth, because if you see that shape or you hear that sound, your immediate reaction isn't the most logical. To where, oh, maybe it's a speck of dust or that just came too close to my vision. You're like, it's danger. And so the brains are mostly wired for survival rather than for truth, which is why it's so easy to fool them. Things like adrenaline, right, which was released in the brain, and then cortisol can change, like the higher levels of it can change how we see, how we hear, and how we even remember things. Because if you think about it, during a really stressful event or situation that you're in, the release of all of these hormones and chemicals tells the brain to, hey, pay attention right now because this is really important, right? Like this is dangerous. This also triggers the release of another neurotransmitter called noradrenaline, and it helps in memory consolidation, which is like how your brain sort of records and saves your memories. It mostly, like the majority of it happens while we sleep, but depending on how you experience that, your brain puts that ahead of the rest of the memories. Right, like if you're, I don't know, having dinner with a friend and you are having a really heated argument, your brain is going to tag that one as the most important part of the whole situation. And you may both even remember it differently, like depending on your state of mind. Like you may be perceiving it as a harsh conversation, but your friend may perceive it as just another disagreement, right? Right, like for their brain, it's not gonna record as strongly as for you because you were experiencing it as a harsher interaction. Right. What happens is, like, let's say in a more dangerous situation, when all of these neurotransmitters and hormones are released, it makes stronger connections in your brain between the neurons, the brain pathways that we were talking about. For example, the amygdala is the one that's like the alarm system, that, but that has, it is connected to memory consolidation. That's why, like, emotional, stressful, and scary memories are stored so much more vividly than a nice afternoon in the park where you are just reading a book calmly. For us, it means that traumatic experiences are recorded with so much more vividness and viv- okay, I'm sorry, I just made up a random word. Like, we remember them more vividly. Yeah, there you go. I used to suffer panic attacks uh, years ago. Way better now. It can make you completely misunderstand things that somebody else is telling you. Like, that person may be completely not a threat, and but you see their facial expressions, and like you misunderstand it as being threatening, or the person being upset at you or coming for you. It's not the reality, it's just what your brain is telling you based on how it is running at that moment and what neurochemicals are running the most at that moment. We've talked about a couple of different ways that our brain can be easily fooled, and how it can change the way we experience the world. And I think that one of the most clear ones is drugs and alcohol. Like, you have things like stimulant. When two neurons are when one neuron is releasing the neurotransmitters to go to the other one, after the other one uses it up, then it comes back and it gets re-uptaken by the original one that sent it out. And so what stimulants do is they block all of those neurochemicals from going back, constantly allowing it to re-enter the first one, because it's just like, well, it's not going back, so then it's got to go the other way. And so they like overload you with that. And on the opposite end, you have the presents, which are slow down the actual production and transmission of the neurotransmitters in the first place, so there's less of it, and you're like, a lower functioning, dumbed down version of yourself. Like alcohol is more be a great example of that. Our senses, as we just discussed, are already pretty finicky about this smallest of changes. So when you introduce something so extreme as alcohol, is a whole other story. People can have hallucinations, which is actually, you can actually have hallucinations daily, right? It's kind of like, if you hear a knock at the door, or you hear the phone ring, or you see a shadow, and like it's not actually, and you go to the door and nobody's there. It's kind of like a small hallucination. It could be something else that made that sound, and it could be a mix of pareidolia with a sort of hallucination thing. But like I said, with my father-in-law, sometimes your brain may replay a memory on its own, and you don't realize, and it feels like the surround sound, like it's happening in real life, but it's really like, yeah, it's just in your brain. The mind is both brilliant but also pretty buggy. Like, it will fill in the gaps, it will edit your memories. Sometimes, like in your dreams, is a perfect example of how your memories can be melded together into really weird stuff that you wouldn't really even think about when you're awake. um, Sometimes he'll tell you stories that are not true. I would say that knowing this isn't a weakness. It makes us wiser because we can use that information to realize what may or may not be true. And if we think about the ways that our brains can be tricked, then we can go and experience and meet the world with a lot more compassion and understanding, not just for our own experiences, but for other people's experiences. It can also help us to admit that we don't know everything. Remember, reality may not always match to what we think we're seeing or hearing, but that's okay, because what makes us human isn't that perception, is our ability to wonder, to do some critical thinking, to keep learning and searching for the truth. So always trust the evidence, not the claim. All right, guys. So this was really fun. Thank you so much. Remember, everybody, to go subscribe, like the streams, share whatever you can do. I'll see you around.